welcome to this month's QAP meetup. Today I'm going to be talking about how to be a software tester in 2022. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this topic specifically was because I get a lot of questions, a lot of conversation happening around software testing, like the modern style of software testing, what software testing will look like in the next 5 to 10 years. And so I figured with all the companies that I consult, that I work with, I think it'd be a good idea to say, here's what I'm seeing the landscape as, here's where things are trending towards, and here's what you as a software tester could or should be doing as you move into this new space. So if you are brand new to testing, this will probably be even more valuable. If you're a veteran to testing, a lot of this might just be recap of stuff. Either way, hopefully you find something valuable. And already people are walking out, dang it. So real quick, I am currently the head of engineering at an AI company. Before that, I was an engineering manager at Adobe around productivity engineering. I'm also the instructor on Test Automation University, which is an amazing platform. So anyone who's looking into software testing, you want to get into it, it's one of the best resources that I could possibly recommend. So testautomationu.com. I do lots of stuff with open source. Pylenium is probably the most popular library that I'm known for, but otherwise I work on other things too besides Pylenium. Pylenium is mine, I built it, but the other stuff is just other things. But alas, I do lots of speaking at events all around the world, so hopefully you've been able to see me at one. It's pretty cool. I really like going to these events because I get to network with people, I get to learn from other people way smarter than I am, and then I get to come back to Utah and hopefully share some of the learning that I got. I will occasionally stream on Twitch. I haven't done it in like the last month because I've been really busy running a company. But our YouTube channel that we have, if you just search QA at the Point, you'll find it. And we have all of our events, all of our recordings are on there, so you can check them out whenever you'd like. And lastly, my proudest achievement is I'm the founder of QAP. That's this community based in Utah, USA. But we have a lot of people around the world that also join as well. So it's pretty awesome, and all of you are part of it. So thank you for that. I think someone asked if things are being recorded. Yes, they will be, we promise. And they'll be edited so it's nice and smooth. All my ums and ums will go away. Be so great. Okay, so let's start things off. Just recently, ZipRecruiter released a paper around all the different industries and all the different jobs that exist in the world. Can you believe it? It's a pretty big report. The link is there if you want to check it out. It's actually pretty huge. Some of it is with software engineering, software development, but a lot of it is with architectural stuff, scientists in botany and cancer research, a bunch of things. And what they were trying to do is help graduates that are graduating this year determine where should they go into the job search, right? What jobs are the good ones? And in the report, they found that quality analysts and testers were among the jobs that had the best future outlook. And there was only 4 of them. So if you actually go to this link and check it out, there was 4. It was software developers, there was the quality analysts, testers, nurses, and one more. I forgot the other one, but I remember nurses was the 3rd one too. So for anyone who wants to get into the software testing space, it's a great career. There's lots of opportunity in here, lots of things you're able to do, and many companies want this. So my first question to the group is why? Why is quality important? Why do companies want to have testers? And anyone can come off mute. You're more than welcome to post. Why is quality important? Oh, I think someone's talking. Sorry, I think we're going to turn you up a little bit.
Does that work? I was just saying repeat business. If you're putting out bad code, people aren't going to go back to your site, use your app.
Yeah, very true. I went to Apollo Burger, got food poisoning. I have never been since. So one bad experience. It could have been a freak accident. It could have been a cook. It could have been one bad thing. But that one chance that they had to make me an Apollo Burger customer was gone when I got food poisoning, because I never want to go through that day ever again. My poor bum, y'all. No thanks.
In the chat, we got Alexis saying credibility, and Rochelle, it makes their company look good.
There you go. Good stuff. All right. Here's a quote from Charles Rolls. Poor quality is remembered long after low prices are forgotten. Enter Apollo Burger example. I will never forget. That day was hell for me on that poor toilet. I don't know what was worse, me or the toilet, but we were both victims to Apollo Burger there. But yes, poor quality. It takes one bad experience for the customer to never visit your stuff again. And they will tell other people, like I'm telling all of you, that Apollo Burger was not fun. And so that might create a bias in you to think, well, I see Apollo Burger, but maybe I should go somewhere else. Because I remember that one time Carlos had the Hershey squirts, and I don't want that for myself. So, yes, it doesn't matter how cheap it is. It could be free. If it is not high quality, it does not matter. Another quote here from John Ruskin. Quality is never an accident. It is always the result of intelligent effort. Do you feel that's true? Do you feel it's not? Astro Burger for life. There you go. I got to try that one, and hopefully it's better. Quality is never an accident. I don't think anyone has been able to just write perfect code from the get-go, write perfect products, perfect designs, perfect architectures, perfect tooling, perfect anything from the get-go, and just deliver it. And the customer's like, wow, this is the best piece of software ever in my whole life. Thank you for that. No, right? That doesn't happen that way. You have to actually put some thought into it. There has to be intent behind it. There's no way for you to build something high quality by mistake, right? So it's another reason why software testing is important. Moving on. Here's another one from Peter Drucker. Quality isn't what you put into it, it's what the customer gets out of it. For those of you who know me, you may have heard me say something like, it's up to the customer to tell you whether it's high quality or not. It is not up to the tester to tell you that. What I meant by that was ultimately the customer is the one paying for it, they're the one using it, and they're the one telling you whether or not they're gonna come back or not, right? For the tester, in that statement that I said, what I'm trying to get at is that the tester alone cannot be the one to be the judge of all quality. That's not really your role. You can assess quality for sure. There's indications of quality for sure. But at the end of the day, you want to get it out to customers because that's where the value actually lies, and customers actually get to tell you whether or not you're gonna miss the mark. So the earlier you can introduce testers, the earlier you can introduce your users and customers, the faster you get more accurate and relevant feedback about the quality of what you're building. All right, so let's go through this exercise real quick. One of my favorite ones is always to ask people, what do you think about the quality of this thing, right? We had Dwayne say, Astro Burger is obviously high quality, do that one, for life. And I've never been Astro Burger, so I don't know, right? But for them, it's a high quality burger place. So let's take the first one, Netflix. Good old Netflix. Is Netflix high quality? Maybe.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Oh, shoot. Oh, that's a good answer. There you go. I guess if you had the mic, why? Why is Netflix not high quality anymore?
Specifically, I think just because of the recent monthly price raises, also just the availability of the type of content that's on Netflix versus like something else like Disney Plus or even like Peacock, which is free. They just have a little more variety, a little more fun, and for me, Netflix has just lost its quality.
There you go. And one of the hard parts, by the way, for a lot of these businesses is that you have competitors in your space. And so if you have a competitor, which you almost will have, they're going to compare you immediately to your competitors. And so if they feel that a feature from another service or another product is higher quality, well, now you're comparing against each other, right? Now there's gonna be some people in the case of this subscription that they may have Netflix and they may have Disney Plus. But if they have to pick one or the other, well, now they're gonna be a lot more, right? Like a lot more meticulous about how they compare these two and decide which one they're gonna be putting their money into. Underneath this, I put that there's monthly payments, streaming quality, recommendations. These are features that Netflix has. So my next question would be, well, how would you test these things? So let's take one of them, streaming quality. How would you test streaming quality to make sure that it's high quality? I always get one person that says, do you just sit down and watch TV shows all day? Like, wouldn't that be great as a tester? Just watch shows for a living. No.
Dwayne in chat says different bandwidths, different screen types, screen resolutions.
There you go. So that seems like you'd be doing some form of exploratory testing against those parameters, right? Against that. Anyone else on monthly payments or recommendations or streaming quality? How would you test those things?
Automation could be an answer to some of those, like recommendations. There's probably a life cycle for recommendations, and seeing that it actually recommends something based on what people liked.
Yeah, there's some things there as well. I actually read one of the articles from one of the Netflix architects talking about how, I forgot the name of the strategy they use for actually like compressing videos and decompressing them. But they actually use automated testing for that specific thing to make sure they're compressing and decompressing the way that they expect it to, which is pretty cool. But there's also things that are very difficult to automate when it comes to video quality. So they do other things more on the exploratory side of things as well. So it's really, really cool. But interesting. So for anyone who has been using Netflix, do you like the streaming quality? Are you like, yeah, this is a good quality stream right here? And you're already like, eh.
Well, as a consumer, I don't think it quite matters.
Okay.
From a consumer,
So if it was pixelated, you wouldn't care.
that's not necessarily true. As long as there's like I'd say a base of like 1080.
So there's a standard that you expect now as a customer.
Sure.
There's a standard. You're like, if they can't do 1080, why are they even competing with all the big guns?
Exactly.
Oh, snappity snap. Something in chat?
Most of the time.
Uh-oh, lost context. That's okay. Let's keep moving on. So the next one is Nike. Now, I don't mean talking like walking into a Nike store. I mean like their apps or their website, let's say. So let's take Nike. Is Nike high quality and why? I try to pick brands that everyone knows, hopefully.
So with ordering online, it's very easy to do.
Yeah, so the shopping hopefully is pretty.
Yeah, the experience is good. You're going to get it. I mean, the repeat business, they've been around forever. You know, I'm sure they're putting millions of dollars into their website.
Ooh, look at that from Alexis. It's almost impossible to order. Oh, snap, I lost it.
On release days.
Nike has an interesting story when Steph Curry, where they didn't remember his name, so he switched. Oh, shoot. Well, there you go. I mean, so interesting. So there's parts, I mean, and notice how some people know some things that are high quality and some things that were low quality, right? But all of these stories and everything, all of our experiences, our perspectives are painting a picture of quality around this. So I'm going to go to one more, but I think hopefully the point is starting to solidify a bit. How about in Utah, we have this thing called Intermountain Healthcare. It's a hospital, think healthcare. Is Intermountain Healthcare, is that high quality or not? If you don't live in Utah, think of your own hospital system, the big one that, you know, where you live. Is that high quality or not?
There's a lot of factors that go into deciding whether, like, just any insurance is better than any insurance. You really have to do a lot of research.
And would you say that having to do all that research, like what if they were able to just say, based off of your parameters, here is the insurance that would best fit you? Would that be a good experience or a bad experience?
If it's tailored to you, I'd say it's good. Most of the time.
Okay, asterisk there.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have something, David.
Kathleen on chat, healthcare in general is not. They are pressured to make profit over quality. And what I was going to say is my wife actually works in healthcare and will not work at any IHC, just from the story she's heard from insiders.
So she hasn't worked there, and yet just because of the perspectives of other people, it's enough to push you away from it. Very, very interesting. So in this, the point I'm trying to make is that all of us have our own definitions of quality. Some of the things are similar, evergreen kinds of things, right? I think we can all agree that because all of the streaming services have 1080, you would expect all of them to have 1080. And so it would be kind of weird if you opened up a video and you didn't have that option, right? That'd be like, oh, that would just stand out because that's just a feature set that you would expect because all the other competitors are doing it, right? And this is where product owners and business analysts can help out because they're looking at competitors and what do customers expect and things like that to try to prevent that from happening. But it's not a perfect science either. Another part is that some of us have had high quality experiences with some of these products and companies. Some of us have had really low quality experiences. For example, when we talk about healthcare, when I talk to someone who is Black, it is almost always a low quality experience for them. And so when I asked the question I asked you, when I asked, what if you had an AI system that recommended the insurance for you? All of them go, hell no, because it's for sure going to be biased against me. Oh snap, folks, oh snap. So interesting stuff, interesting stuff. Let's keep moving on. So let's dive into Netflix a little bit. Let's look at the quality at Netflix. How do they, and let's ask some questions here. You're gonna see we ask questions a lot in software testing. It's one of our jams. We ask lots of questions. The first one is, how do they know if new code breaks something? So you just have testers just testing every single change and making sure that nothing breaks.
Hopefully they do test every single change. That seems like a smart thing to do. But I would imagine a lot of these code breaks come in via complaints too.
Yeah, I mean, you have your developers writing code, right, for lots of different reasons. It could be for chores, it could be for bug fixes, it could be a feature that they're writing. Whatever the case may be, they add something. Now, companies like Netflix will have tens of thousands of lines of code. They're very large, right? So lots and lots of stuff. So a new developer comes in and they're probably like, oh, geez, I have to write this new feature and it's nerve-wracking because hopefully I don't break something, right? And so if we put all of the onus on the tester, well, now the tester shares that same pressure, because now they're like, oh crap, a new developer, I have to make sure this person doesn't break anything, right? And so yes, I mean, the software tester will definitely help, but they do more than just depend on software testers. So if I don't see anyone posting things in chat, that's okay. How do they know if customers are or are not running into issues right now? The most common answer I hear from this is customer support sends them a ticket.
I've actually ran into issues on Netflix on playback, and it has an auto reporter system. So they know that there was a break in my video and they said, don't worry, we already took a note of it.
There you go. And that probably instills a little more confidence for you to say, oh, they saw that. Wow, interesting. So even if that's not telling you what they're going to do about it, right? That just tells you that they saw it. But at least for the customer, that's like, oh, that's a little pat on the back. Oh, they're taking care of me. You know, that could maybe raise the quality of that experience. Usually better than a oops, sorry, and then you just get a white page, right? It's probably better than that experience. Little dinosaur, unless you like playing the dino game. Interesting. So yeah, like I said, the most common answers I get would be there's negative reviews on the App Store, and then customer support sends you a ticket. And I'll tell you right now, that would be way too slow, way too reactionary for companies like an Adobe or a Netflix to respond to. That would be super low quality if that's the only mechanism you have to get feedback.
You can have like data that tracks if a page is crashing.
Yeah, you can have alerts, monitors, things that check for those things, right? Especially when you know the type of errors, right? So if you know like a 500 is bad, then you can always have your systems look for 500s, right? And so the things that you know, yep.
Would that be like a more effective way than listening to customer support, things like that?
Yes. So almost always they'll have more automated means to do it. Now the problem with automation in that aspect is that you can only automate what you know. And so if you don't know to look for a specific error in a video that's playing, for example, well, you can't really add the monitor to check that. And so that's why they still have things to help with, like when you run into an issue, here's a form you could fill out and we'll get the timestamp, we'll get your device information, we'll get everything we need from you. and send that as a ticket. But there's a lot of pieces that we will try to automate as well, especially the known knowns. And anything that we don't know, we try to create strategies around how can we find out the things we don't know. Yeah.
Ryan Palmer in chat, check logs after deploy, see what errors are coming through.
Yeah, so you could do that. And that's also a good idea as well. And hopefully you're doing that, because like right now when you say we deploy something, that's a great time to be watching it, because most people are watching as you deploy. But then a week later, you're probably not looking at that anymore. And so that's where you have to kind of strategize how you're going to detect problems, how you're going to mitigate problems. So normally in a strategy like that, you'll probably do something like a blue-green deploy or a feature flag. That way you can release something, check out the logs, see how things are working, look all your systems, how everything's behaving. And then if everything looks good, then you start progressing through that. And I can talk about that later. But yes, there's lots of things you can do here. How do they prevent someone from hacking your account? And I'll go a little bit faster just for sake of time. How do they make sure to charge you the right amount of money? Because I promise you, they're making sure they can charge you. But they better not double bill me, because that would be a low experience. Moving on. How do they verify that Netflix works on all of their supported devices? For example, I could be watching Netflix on my Xbox in one room, and then all of a sudden Apollo Burger hits me, so I have to go to the bathroom, and I pull the same show on my phone, and it just transfers over seamlessly. I start the show as if I didn't leave at all. Dang, that's pretty cool, right? So how do they do that? My goodness. How do they keep Netflix up and running at all times? At least that's what it looks like, right? How do they keep it up and running at all times? I never go to Netflix and go, I hope it works today so I can watch my show. You go to Netflix and you watch your show, right? How do they make sure that happens? And then my last question here is, how do you know, or how do they know what makes a feature high quality? So the recommendation system, how do they know that's a high quality recommendation system? How do they know which thumbnails to put on to yield the best return for them?
I think it has a lot to do with interaction by the customer, like you were saying before. The customer tells you what's high quality.
Yep. A lot of these things that they're not able to determine before they deploy. They can get 80-90% of it down. We think this is awesome. We think we're on the right track. It's working the way that we expect. Awesome. But once they get into customers' hands, that's the true test of whether or not they're on the right track or not. Very nice. Okay, so now that we've gone through that, hopefully this is getting your brains churning a little bit, going, yeah, how do they do that, right? Especially if you've never been in software testing before, you've probably never looked at Netflix that way and asked those questions. I go, yeah, every time I open up Netflix now, I'm gonna be thinking about how the heck do they make sure that it goes from my living room to my iPad, to my Apple TV, to my, how are they doing that? And why does it work so well and so good every time I do that? And someone might say, didn't work for me, Carlos. You're exactly right. It may not be the same experience for everyone. And yet, there we're at. So now that we've talked about quality at a high level, now I want to talk about software development strategies. And after this, notice how we're going like 10,000 foot view. We're going down, down, down until we talk about the tester role specifically. But I want to paint this picture because it's going to help show you as a tester what we have to kind of determine and go through as business leaders. So the 6 phases of software development, let's say that's these buckets right here. You start on the left with analysis and go all the way through to maintenance, right? You deploy it, you release it, you support and maintain it on the far right. Now, this is a diagram that comes from this place, Brocoders, which already is a terrible name, .com/blog/agile software and stuff. But diagrams like this exist all over the place, and they all will look something like this. Now, in here, there's a testing phase. Now, even though that's technically true, you want to have one last validation thing before you deploy. I wouldn't call it testing, because the problem with this is anyone who's not a software tester immediately looks at this and goes, well, testers belong in the testing phase. That just makes sense. There's a testing phase. Your title is tester. Tester goes into the testing phase. They even put QA engineer tester in the testing phase. And I love that they put DevOps there too. Anyway, but just the fact that it makes it so easy for people that are like a CEO or a CTO or anyone who may not have come from the software testing world to immediately put testers in that phase. Now, anyone in the software testing space knows that, well, I do more than just that. If you're coming to this, hopefully you know that. But if you don't, this is where I see a lot of testers fail, is they stay inside the testing phase. And then they ask, why do people have a hard time knowing what value I provide? Well, it's because you're staying in the testing phase. Interesting, interesting. But regardless, there's these 6 phases that you kind of have to go through, and you do kind of have to go in this linear way, right? So you can't really maintain something you haven't deployed yet, right? So yes, you kind of have to go in this linear fashion. So let's talk about these strategies now. I'm going to talk about 3 of them. There's quite a few, but we're going to talk about 3 of them. They're kind of the main ones. The first one is Waterfall. Now, Waterfall is essentially those 6 phases you saw just turned into how you do work. So we're going to do all the analysis up front. We're then going to design everything, develop everything, test everything, and launch. And then the project is over. The problem with this strategy is that you are putting all of weeks and months into the first phase of define requirements, weeks and months into design everything, and then you go to develop, and immediately the developer is going to go, hold on, I don't quite understand these requirements. I don't quite understand this design. Or in order for me to build this design, I have these 5 options. Which one would you rather have? Depending on the option you pick, that's going to change the design. Well, then it goes back to design and they go, well, if that's the case, then we have to change this. Well, that changes requirements. So now we go back to requirements. So all those weeks and months that you spent in define and design, once you get back to develop, that's a quarter or 2 gone. You're now going back into the first 2 phases and going through it again. It gets even worse once you go, okay, we all agree, nice. And then you go to test everything. Because now you've built everything, you're going to test it, and what are testers going to do when you give them a build? They're going to test the thing, right? They're going to find issues, and it's going to go back to develop. Develop's going to go, okay, well, that changes things because now you found these issues. Well, that raises these questions and considerations. You have to go back to design, back to define requirements, and you've lost a year now. So that was the main problem with Waterfall, and why this is the least common of the strategies nowadays. You don't normally see this anymore. You see many waterfalls. We'll get to that soon. The next one is Kanban, which for me is probably one of my favorite ones. I'm a big fan of Kanban, but the whole point of Kanban is to work at the right thing at the right time. That is, in a nutshell, that's what you're trying to do. You have this requested column, that blue one, and all you're trying to do is prioritize that list all the time. So that way, when a developer looks at the top of the list, it grabs the top one and says, this is what I'm going to work on next. Moves it to done, grabs the next one from requested and keeps going. This WIP limit you see, WIP means work in progress. You can see here that they have a WIP limit of 4 things. So developers shouldn't be working at more than 4 things at the same time. I will admit that right now in my company, we have a few people that have like 6 things in progress right now. I'm cracking down on that, but it's because we don't have a process specified to say, well, if something is blocked, what do you do? Right, so it's blocked, they leave it in progress. And so it looks like they have a lot of things in progress. In reality, there's only 1 or 2 things really in progress. Another thing we have to solve, right, in our process. Now, I wish that things were this simple, right? In an ideal world, it'd be so great to just be like, yeah, the top one, that's always the right one to work on. And if the CEO says, work on this thing next instead, there's a whole expedite flow to make sure that the CEO gets what they need and then go back to the top of the list and keep doing your thing. In a perfect world, wouldn't that be great? Yes, but that's almost never how it is. And you almost very rarely have 3 columns, right? There's usually always like 8 columns. And one of them is always testing for some reason. Well, I shouldn't say for some reason. It's probably because all the diagrams show a testing phase. So you have a testing column. Okay. The next strategy is called Scrum. Now, a lot of people will call this Agile, even though it's not. Agile is more of a cultural thing, and Scrum is more of the process, but people mix and match and it's fine. So if you've heard Agile or Scrum, they're probably talking about the same thing. But anyway, this is where the mini waterfall comes in. Right? Instead of trying to define, design, and build the entire project from the beginning of the process, instead you break the project down into pieces, usually feature sets, and then you put those feature sets into sprints. And a sprint is a 2 to 4 week block of time. And as the team, you say, what can we do in 2 to 4 weeks? You define what you're going to be doing in those weeks, you then build it, test it, and launch it. So the idea here, again, instead of building the whole project from scratch, let's make a small piece that's easier to build, that's easier to test rather than the whole building. Let me just test this, right? And then you go through your sprints until the project is complete. And then fantastic, the project's done, pick on the next project, break it down, put it into sprints and do the same thing. Again, in an ideal world, doesn't it sound fantastic? But it almost rarely happens that way. So diving into the Scrum process, because this is the most common one that you will see. In the Scrum process, you'll have your product owner or product manager. They're the person that is the bridge between the business and the engineering team. You also have a Scrum Master. You don't have to, but a lot of them do because people really want to rigorously follow Scrum. And so they have a Scrum Master because it can be chaotic. There's all these ceremonies and things you have to do, sometimes valuable, sometimes not. And your Scrum Master is there to help the team fall into the Scrum process nicely. So on the left here, user stories, yes, build all the stories and everything, define them, put it in a backlog, prioritize it, put it into the sprints you want. Hopefully you have a sprint backlog. That's fantastic if you can do that. And then you give the work to the dev team. They try to get it done within those 2 to 4 weeks, and then they hand it off to someone else to do the deployment. So of these three, I'm curious for everyone watching, which of the three do you see your team or maybe your organization doing?
In my current experience, it's actually per team basis sometimes.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah, where some of them will choose Kanban, some of them Scrum.
Yeah, usually what I've seen is the teams that are not product teams, let's say like a platform engineering team or a SRE team, usually they will be in Kanban, where the product teams are in Scrum. But I'm curious what others have to say.
Dwayne in chat said Kanban, and Robbie in chat said, sadly, a weird hybrid of Waterfall, but they like to call Scrum.
There you go. I mean, yeah, in a way, if you look at Scrum, like there's other diagrams. I just pulled this one off of this website, but some of them will be like circles, so it looks like cycles and everything. It's essentially mini Waterfall, right? Because you're trying to just break the scope of the work down and then go through that process, which isn't it's not a bad thing. I think the weakness is that people don't know how to actually like work through Scrum. And so a lot of them will hire consultants or Scrum Masters to have like a really rigorous following, very strict following of the Scrum ceremonies and everything. And I think that's where you lose a lot of the value. But yeah, I mean, every company does a little bit different. But anyway, so yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, Scrum is the most common one that I've seen. Kanban is usually for non-product teams. But yeah, let's keep moving on. So the rest of these software testing strategies are going to be mainly around the Scrum methodology here. But these are going to be different strategies that different companies will use. And then you can kind of see which one you fit into, which one you like more. Let's just jump in so you can see what I'm talking about. So the first strategy I'm calling traditional. The traditional strategy is where you have testers on a separate team. Most companies that do this are still doing Waterfall. And it's usually because they don't know how to change to a different thing. That's usually why. And they end up hiring another CTO or someone to come in and actually make like a huge shift for everyone. But in this, you almost always have an offshore team. So you might have a tester that's managing like Rainforest QA, for example, or your entire testing team may be offshore. You just hire a bunch of people from a different country and you send them the builds, they do a bunch of testing overnight, send it back to you. The next day you go through all the stuff they found and start marking things, right? Because they're good at, because they use separate teams, they usually have many different types of separate teams. And so in this example, I put release management. There's almost always a release management because the product teams themselves don't know how to do that or are unable to, or they don't trust them to. One of the three. And so they have a whole release management team that does all that for them. And for the testers, the focus is mainly on the feature set of the current build. So they care about whatever the developer throws on their plate, and that's what all your focus is. So you're probably spending a lot of time writing test cases and probably really detailed test cases, very detailed test plans probably, lots of documentation, because without that, you're kind of just waiting for a build. So it's a lot of time that you're just sitting there doing nothing. So they try to fill it with other things that they believe will be valuable, and so test cases and test plans usually come out of it. Traditional. The next strategy I call traditional embedded. This is where your testers are actually on the Scrum team. So it's no longer a separate team. There may be an offshore team, but the whole point of this is to have testers embedded on the Scrum team. So one or more testers. I rarely see that there's many testers on a team. Usually there's one, but sometimes if they have a ratio at the company, that's usually when you'll see more. Without that ratio that's defined anywhere, they normally don't. So what I mean by ratio is they might say for every 2 developers, there should be 1 tester. And so if a team has 10 developers, then that team will have 5 testers, for example. But otherwise, they normally usually only have 1, maybe 2 testers on the team. These are now considered full stack dev teams because now they have everyone represented on the team. You don't have back end somewhere and front end somewhere, mobile somewhere else. They usually try to bring everyone into the same team, which I think was a good improvement to a lot of things. And for the testers, the focus is on the current build and the next build, because now they're on the team, so they have a better idea of what's coming down the pipeline for the next sprint, and so they can plan a little more ahead of time for the next build. But they really only care about the builds coming their way. So still test cases probably, still test plans, all that good stuff. Here I want to talk about the team structure because I'm talking about this full stack or cross-functional team. So I want to have an actual visual here so you can see what I'm talking about. On the top, you have these guilds. You may call them specializations or domains, whatever you want to call it. You have like your front-end developers, back-end developers, an iOS developer. There's QA in purple. There might be quite a few actually. You might have a technical writer, for example, on your team or something like that. But every column is a different specialization. Then every row is a team. So in this case, at this company, we call them experience teams, but this is that cross-functional Scrum team I was talking about. So notice how you have all these developers. There's the 1 tester and the 1 PM. Great. What is the problem, though, that you see with this visual, specifically for the tester?
They don't longer see embedded in there, so they may not know what team 2 is doing if it relates to team 1.
Yep, that could be a problem for sure. Anyone else, what problems do you see for the tester in this kind of a setup? Thinking of the traditional embedded, right? I'll help out. That's a lot of developers moving at one time for 1 tester.
Dwayne in chat says, I think it depends on how much work they want the tester to do versus the rest of the dev team.
And I can vouch that it's almost always a lot. It's almost always a lot of things they have to do. And so the tester becomes a bottleneck very quickly in this strategy.
Yeah, Kathleen in chat said, tester has to cover everything, dev is specialized.
It's a good way to put it. Very concise, yeah. Interesting. So in the traditional embedded approach, there's nothing wrong with the structure here. The problem is mainly that, to Dwayne's point, if the workload is that they have to test everything that all these people are outputting, well, that's a lot of surface area for them to test. And if everyone's working in a 2-week sprint and you get all these things at different times, or worst case scenario, you get everything at the same time, you're missing that sprint for sure, right? And I think that's a common story I hear with software testers and software developers, by the way, and CTO. They all mention the same thing. We always miss our sprints because we either underestimate or we don't take into account all the testing and the bug fixing and the chores. We only ever estimate on the features, and so we miss every time. So let's keep moving on then. The next strategy I want to talk about, I call left embedded. So for anyone who's heard of the shift left culture, this is essentially what this one is talking about. So in here, when we say shift left, notice how the green boxes are now the 3 on the left. So instead of the tester being isolated to just the testing phase, the tester is now integrated early into the process, part of design, part of definition, part of requirements gathering, part of scoping, part of building, right? They're now part of this, not just testing anymore. So now the team, hopefully, will design, build, and test as a team. There's been a lot of times where I've heard developers say, I wish I could be part of those definition meetings or refinement meetings. And I'm like, welcome to the club, friend, because testers want that too. So it's not necessarily just a testing problem. It's usually a process problem because The business side may not think to bring in testers or developers yet, right? So what I'm showing you here is it's a valid strategy and you should probably do it.
Carlos,
Yo,
quick question. Are you talking about the triad meetings? You're not talking about grooming or planning, right?
you can be part of the, so when I'm talking about shift left, it's you're trying to be integrated as early into the process as possible. So yes, if you're doing the Scrum and you're doing these groomings and refinements and any of those types of things, the triad or three amigos, all that stuff is part of the shift left mindset.
Oh, okay. All right. Just so you're saying QA being part of triad because they're generally part of planning and grooming.
Yeah,
Okay,
ideally,
all right.
I would have my tester in everything.
Okay, just clarifying. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons why it might be hard to do that is because the tester doesn't know what to do in those meetings, and that's another problem. But if in an ideal world, I would have the tester be in all of those things, right? Because just again, their perspective is different from everyone else's, and so I think the best ideas come from other ideas. So if I could have someone who is looking at the product or the features in a different way, that's only going to help in our risk analysis, in our example mapping, in our refinement, in those kinds of things, right? So, I mean, we don't want to bring in everyone because, you know, every extra person you bring in is going to add some complexity as well, but the tester should definitely be part of that. And then here, the focus for the tester is obviously the build, right? But their focus is also now on improving the team and its processes. So this is the first time that quality starts to come out of just the build itself, and you're looking at quality a little bit differently. Now you're asking things like, what is the quality of this grooming meeting? How valuable is it to have all 15 people on the team in on this thing? What if we had these three instead, hash things out here, instead of wasting everyone's time, let's have these three, get things refined here, and then introduce more people into it. That might be a better use of people's time, for example. And so now you're looking at different aspects of your process, your people and the way you work, and asking that question of, what is the quality of X? The next strategy, I'm calling right embedded. Now this one is more niche, I will say, just right out the gates. This one is not as common, but we'll go through it anyway. So testers are usually on niche teams. So this might be like a performance testing team. You might have like a SecOps team that does security and stuff. You might have a team that's like SRE, site reliability engineering. All those are testing teams of some variety, and the testers might move on to those to help that out, right? So they may not be on the Scrum team anymore. They might be, but now you're focusing on the right-hand side of the process, right? So no longer define and design and build, but okay, let's test and deploy things, release it, support and maintain. What's the quality like in those aspects of our process? And the focus for testers here is now deployments and production. Again, not as common, but there it is. You're aware that this thing does exist. Also, for these ones, you probably know you probably have to know software engineering and automation of some variety because you do a lot of that in these three. So if that's something that you like to do as a tester, you might already be gravitating towards these things with like CI/CD and stuff like that, where all the other ones don't really require any programming skill at all. This was probably the one that does require it, depending on the team you're on. Okay. The next strategy I'm calling modern embedded. Modern, what a fun word. What I mean by that is for all of the thought leaders out there, this is the one that they're mainly talking about right now. So you've probably heard of things like quality coaches or quality advocates, test ops. Might as well throw ops on the end of everything. But quality coaches is becoming the hot topic right now. So if you're on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatnot, you're gonna see this talked about a ton. And in this kind of strategy, the product teams embrace a DevOps culture, meaning that the product team is able to define and design and then go all the way through to support and maintain. At the very least, they could do deploy and release. So those first 4 boxes there, the first 4 boxes is all about DevOps. The product teams can do their own operations instead of giving it to someone like release management to do it for them. In this case, the testers are involved in all phases and try to improve quality throughout the whole thing. So now it's the shift left and shift right combined, and you care about quality in every single one of these pieces. Usually your more senior testers will be the people that are quality coaches or quality advocates because they've had experience in all these pieces. I probably wouldn't see like a junior software tester immediately becoming a quality coach, right? Shoot, maybe, yeah, I don't know. They might. I shouldn't say never. And for this, in this case, the focus for the tester is leading the team to own their own testing and quality. So the quality coach is probably going to lead a lot of the testing and quality efforts, but their goal is to make it so then the team can do a lot of it themselves. Very similar to what DevOps is trying to do. Get it? So then the developers can do the operations themselves. Now, one of the big weaknesses I see of this approach is notice all the things that I've just said to put onto developers. That's a lot. They have to do all the operations now. They have to do all of the testing now. They have to do everything. Poor developers. I empathize with them if that's the case. Yeah.
Ryan in chat says, so encourage unit tests.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and that should happen in any one of these, by the way. In all of these strategies, they should be doing some sort of testing. But I mean, yeah, again, it's one of the problems that easier said than done, right? I know that there are teams where the developers will refuse to test or they have a really hard time with, you want me to test you? And that's usually an educational thing. And the problem I see there is that the tester doesn't know how to convince the developers to do that or to get upper management support to help them make those changes. And so they feel stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I guess I'll just do all the testing then, and then just be really sad about everything. But the quality coach, this is the hotness right now because it enables the tester to focus on bigger problems than the correctness of a build. And if I were to hire a tester right now, I would want someone that can do this. Mainly because at my company, my developers are very good at testing, but not all aspects of testing, right? So if I needed a tester, I would have them focusing on all these bits here because there's for sure processes that need improvement. There's for sure tests that need improvement. There's pieces right now, I don't have a great monitoring solution, for example, right? And so having a tester go in there that has experience with things on the right side of the process would be invaluable to me. And I don't need them to take all the testing. No, please, because I've worked really hard to get my developers to do a lot of the testing. Instead, I would know exactly which gaps to put them in and say, we need help here. I don't know how all my systems integrate at the end of the day. My developers are really good at writing tests for their single repo, for their single service. But once we get to integrations, it gets a little spicier. So having a quality coach help me with that problem, worth tons of money for me. Not that they have to implement it themselves, but the fact that they can work with me and developers to create a strategy and how we're going to do it is already valuable. And the very last one, I don't have a pretty picture for it. I just call it holistic quality. This is now quality internally and externally. I have a lot of text here, I apologize. So engineering experience, tooling, architecture. These are now things you're thinking outside of just the product team. And now you're thinking of what is the experience for all of my engineers, for all of my developers? Do they enjoy working here? What's the quality of working at the place I'm at? What do other companies do that developers enjoy? Right? Give you a great example. We use Gitpod where I'm at. And if you don't know what Gitpod is, it's essentially a development environment that's containerized. And what's super cool about that is I can onboard someone in minutes. At Adobe, we'd onboard someone in 2 weeks, and we thought that was really fast. I mean, something the size of Adobe onboarding someone that fast was, yeah, that was quick. But at my company right now, because we have Gitpod, they don't have to set up their machine at all. They literally just give us their GitHub account. They click a button that says open in Gitpod, and they can start coding immediately. Everything is already created for them. The whole development environment, they don't have to install anything. Don't worry about your NVM or Node or anything like that. It's all set up. You just start coding. So that's part of the engineering experience. Is that high quality at your company or not? You can think of it as testability. How easy is it for you and your team to test things? What's the quality of your testability? Is it high or not? If it's not, what would you do to improve it? Cross-business quality. One of my favorite examples was at Adobe, the sales team would have to set up their demo, and it would take them about a week to, because they would have to set up an environment and add a bunch of data into it. Okay, I want to make a team that I'm going to be pitching to Adidas. So I want to make a team that has this many projects, these many things inside, team members that have this hierarchy. I need owners, I need admins, they had to create everything from scratch. And then once they had it in a good place, they tested it themselves and everything, then they would take that demo to their sales call and then pitch the demo to the potential customer. Take them forever. So what ended up happening is that they would have to pause some of their sales demos because either something wasn't working or it failed in front of everyone, which is probably the worst thing for a CEO is to have your demo hiccup on you, right? That sucks. So they came up to me and the CEO said, Carlos, I need your team to improve the sales demo because I would like to be able to demo someone the same day. So we said, okay. So what did we do? We worked on creating a tool that will allow them to actually create environments for demo purposes on the fly. They will specify if there's a customer that they want to mimic. For example, if we were pitching to Adidas and Nike's already our customer, maybe we can make something that is similar to Nike and just copy it over. What would that look like? How much would it cost us? Because that's a whole database creation, whatnot. But it would depend on the customer they wanted. We also had drop downs and fields that they could use to say, I want these many teams, this many projects, and it was just values. And then you click generate. You would create it in a few minutes, and then you'd have it ready to go. All of it templated, all of it automated, and all of it controlled very nicely so the sales team could just make an environment and immediately goes to a sales call if they wanted to. Or if you were talking to someone at dinner, because the CEO would do this, you're talking to someone at dinner, they can immediately pull up something while they're talking and have the environment ready to go at the dinner table. So what's the quality of the stuff that your sales team is using? What about marketing? Do they have what they need as well? Now you're looking at cross-business, no longer just, again, the product anymore. Standards of high quality are transparent and understood. One of the ways that we were able to get developers to help with our testing was to define what we meant by high quality. What I mentioned before was it's difficult for developers to get on board because they don't know what the heck they need to be doing to help you out. They just say, oh, do all the testing. Well, when you tell them that, what is their current perception of what testing looks like? Well, it's probably a very manual, let me go through the test cases and go through a checklist. That doesn't sound fun to anyone, including testers. Right? That sucks for everybody involved. And so if that's their current understanding of software testing and you say, can you help me with testing? Well, of course they're going to push back because that sounds like the most boring thing to do in the world. So you have to set standards of what high quality means. What does that look like and how do we get there? And then say, developer, your role in this are these pieces. Then they go, oh, okay, well, I can do that. That's not too bad. Maybe they need someone to help teach them or pair with them, but they eventually get to it. But we don't say developers do all the testing. That's not the case either. But we do let them know what is your role in creating a high quality solution and what do we mean by high quality. If they don't understand that, they can't help you. Next one, frameworks, processes, templates, all the things used to make testing and building quality easier. My favorite example in this would be a design system. Design systems are used at the front end. Instead of me having to make a new website page and have to write all the HTML and CSS myself with the React hooks or whatnot, instead you may have a design system that are just templates with all of the things you could possibly need. You need a button and it needs to be Netflix red. I don't need to worry about what color code that is or anything. I go to the design system and I literally click and drag it onto my screen. And now the button exists. It's perfectly accessible, works in light mode and dark mode. It has the right color schemes. Everything looks good. It's got the perfect curves that all the other ones have. So it's uniform across the rest of our brand. All that's taken care of because we have a design system. So it makes it easy to build front ends. It makes it easy to build websites when you have that. Okay. And then, of course, identify friction, waste, inefficiencies, and remove them. You're trying to find these things to say what's making us efficient or not efficient, what's making us productive or not productive, what are we doing right now that's really high quality? I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to find the low quality things and focus on those things instead. Are you able to say that right now or not? And wrapping up again, focus is company-wide, not just the product team. So testers in this space, what I did at Adobe was the testers on my team, we were all considered the automation and productivity engineering organization. And all we did was all this. We would literally go around the company and find the things that needed to be improved on, and we would start improving those things. Sometimes that meant that we would consult with teams and ask them, hey, what's something that you could use help with? Can you show us your tech debt? Can you show us what's making things difficult to go out the door? We see that you guys have a hard time getting from this phase to this phase. What's going on? And we would treat them just like customers. And our platform that we were building, our internal developer platform, that was a product that we owned, that we maintained, and we built. And our customers were all the internal developers. Well, I guess everyone internally, but but you know what I mean. So interesting. For external quality, this could be that you have maybe a community. For example, with Gitpod, they have a whole community on Discord. So I'm part of that. And I think it's a very high quality Discord group. And I'm like, how can I use some of this for QAP? Because they spent a lot of time making it pretty awesome. So I ran into an issue with Gitpod. And when I went there, I knew exactly where to go to submit my problem. Someone immediately got out to me about what they were going to do with it. They created a GitHub issue in their project, gave me the link, and helped me track it, so I knew exactly where the progress was. So I knew that I was going to be taken care of within the next week. And then they updated me once it was deployed and said, please verify it so we can make sure it's taken care of, and then we'll close the ticket. Tried it out. It wasn't working for what I was doing. Got back to them. Hey, I have this problem here. This, fantastic. Give us a day. They got a patch in. The next day it was working perfectly. So they were taking care of me the whole time. And for me, it was a very high experience. External quality. All right, I don't see any questions or anything, so I'm gonna keep moving on. So what is the role of a tester? Carlos, you're saying so much. So what the heck is the role of a tester then with all of this? Well, this is what I think, my opinion, of course. Feel free to agree or disagree. I believe that testers help stakeholders to assess quality and provide solutions. And of course, you'll probably use testing to help you with a lot of this. But you're trying to assess quality, and I'll give some things in here about that, but also provide solutions. So the best testers that I know provide solutions. They don't just say, this thing is bad. They say, this thing is bad, and here's some ideas for how we can resolve that. And they're actually part of the discussion with developers and how we're gonna build or fix something. And it's really cool to watch because they look like any other member of the team. You wouldn't even know that they're a tester. So the first one, when I say assess quality, the first one is goodness. How good is it, right? Which sounds kind of funny. How good is the thing? How can it be improved? What would make it good versus great? Also, again, notice how everything's questions. Software testers ask many questions. What makes it good versus great? The next one is correctness. I think this is the one that most people really hyper-focus on, is correctness of something. How correct is it? Are we within the constraints? And what are the trade-offs of these decisions? Correctness, and the correctness will probably change. But goodness and correctness are two different things. The next one is value. What value are we providing? What's the priority and to whom? How can we measure this? And that measure part, I think, is another gap that software testers have. They do all this testing, they do all these activities, and don't track any of it. Maybe within like Zephyr or X-Ray, I guess, or TestRail. You say, well, I have all these test cases, and I ran all the tests, and they all passed, this one failed. I'm measuring things. Not really. You're measuring your testing activity, you're not measuring value. And the last one is risk. When we think about risk, you're trying to prevent problems, detect problems, and mitigate problems. Any questions so far? Because I know I've said a lot in the last few slides. Any questions? So say that one more time. Repeat that question one more time.
Yeah, so like all of the different types of, I guess, I don't know what to call them. What did you call them?
We had these different strategies.
Yes, all the different types of strategies, that's the word. All the different types of strategies, do they change whether a product is on the market or if it's like a beta or anything like that, or like before it's on the market, before it's sold?
I mean, not necessarily. I think because alpha and beta, you could say, are pretty darn close to the same thing. If the product is already out and you're iterating on it, then yes, you'll have a lot more data to work with because there's something out already that people are using. So hopefully you have a lot more mechanisms to learn and iterate on that. But if you have nothing out yet and you're starting a product from scratch, there's a lot of data you're not going to have, right? Hopefully you might bring in customers for like, hey, check this out. What do you think about these designs? Is this going to help solve your problem? So you're trying to use alpha and beta to kind of give you that feedback from customers. But otherwise, the process of like testing and things doesn't really change. It's more so the constraints that change because you may have like timelines you need to get alpha out or specific things that need to be done for beta. But the testing doesn't really change. It's the constraints that do.
I think it's also important to point out that with any of those strategies, that the QA or tester involved should be well-spoken, meaning that they can't be just a quiet wallflower in the room. Correct.
And we'll get to that here when we talk about skills, but yes, everything I'm talking about, the testers are very outspoken. You kind of have to be because you're literally trying to communicate, collaborate with multiple people, multiple teams, and say, here's how I think we can improve on something, and do it in such a way that you're not an asshole, right? So it's very strategic. You have to be very articulate. And like I said, when you're like have to talk to developers and get them to help you test, if you are not convincing, they're never going to do it, and you're always going to be on your own. And then I'm going to show up, and your developers will start testing next month. But it's because I've done it many times before, and I know how to talk to developers about this topic. So it's just something that I think like it's a skill in being able to talk to people and convince them of not just value, but convince them of the different solutions that there are and the trade-offs. And sometimes you yourself have to understand those trade-offs as well and say, yeah, maybe I can get the bug fixed right now. It has to wait because this thing is much more valuable. So, okay, I'm going to bite my tongue because it just makes sense to right now. So it's very strategic, and we'll talk about that in the skills part, but yes. And we can go over a ton of things just in this slide, by the way, but I won't. But just know that when I'm thinking about what a tester does and assessing quality and providing solutions, it's these 4 big buckets. These 4 buckets are the things that I want a tester to help me out with. When it comes to correctness, I would say if things are defined really well, it's the easiest of the 4 to determine. And yet it's the one that software testers are mainly doing, is focusing on the correctness of something. Because it is the easiest one to do. You have a list of acceptance criteria, and it either does those things or it doesn't. But is that good acceptance criteria? Well, that's a different question that goes in a different bucket. See what I mean? So that's why I'm saying like it's these 4 things. When you talk about assessing quality, it's more than just the correctness of something. So this is from Dan Ashby. Oh yeah.
Well, if you can go back for a second.
Will do.
You're right. The correctness is a lot easier to do, especially when you first start. So I think the lesson here, especially for new QA coming in or someone who's just been, thrusted into the QA world, is to grow those as if they were like to-do lists for your own personal growth.
Yes.
And your career.
Yes, and we will get to a part where I tell you the progression of things as a tester. Because yes, if you're starting out, this is probably overwhelming. There's a lot of things, right? But don't worry. So this is the 8 perspectives of quality. This is from Dan Ashby. If you don't follow Dan, by the way, I recommend you do so. They're pretty awesome. Dan Ashby, the 8 perspectives of quality. What he was trying to show here is the 8 perspectives are one of these boxes, right? And those are 8 boxes. The green is external quality. This is the quality from the perspective of the users or customers. The blue is internal quality, the perspective of the company and the team. Then you have team quality, which is more about the people and the work and the quality they're in. And then the org quality, the company overall, what's the quality of that company, right? So some people like working at Blizzard, some people don't, for example, right? So the overall quality of the organization. In this, he talked about a few things here. So for example, you have ideation, which is define and design, and then implementation, which was that build and deploy, and then support and maintenance, which was support and maintain. So when you're thinking about external quality, for ideation, are ideas regarding customers and users' wants and needs. Are those high quality ideas? This is what Dan is challenging. He's saying, as a tester, are you challenging those ideas? Are you asking what is the quality of these ideas? Are we on the right track for things like that? When you go to implementation, the experience of using the implemented software. Well, that sounds like what a lot of testers do right now. They test the experience of the software that you're building, right? So moving on, how would you put testing over the model? Because, okay, lots of cool things that you see there, but if I had to put testing stuff on there, what would that look like? So right here, Dan actually put some activities that you can do. And what I love about this model here is that he shows the word experimentation and the word exploration almost everywhere. And I will pause for effect. Exploration, experimentation, investigation. These are things that you're doing in order to assess the quality of these things and be able to provide solutions as well. So in the blue side, for internal quality, you have A/B experimentation, exploring tech debt. When are we going to pay it back? Do we have a plan for that? When do we do this tech debt? Otherwise, it's always going to keep growing, and then we're eventually going to run into a wall because now it's too big. Do we have a plan for that? If we do, is it a high quality plan? Are we actually acting on that plan? Code reviews, exploring the architecture, exploring integrations. That's exactly the problem I was telling you about that I could use help with right now, and I'd hire Dan if I could. On the right-hand side of things, exploring observability solutions and tooling. What about our release pipeline processes? Are we doing mitigation techniques like blue-green deploys? Progressive deployments as well, right? Anything like that, are we doing that or not? Okay, then the next question was, well then, the tester's supposed to do all these things? What the heck? And he put, well, let me show you where I think testers should fit on this model. So for org quality, you have your leadership folk. So if you have a VP of quality, a director of testing, or whatever these titles are, well, they're probably part of the org quality. And part of their responsibility is making sure that the org quality is high. Makes sense. For team quality, well, they make sure to call out quality coaches, because again, the quality coach is trying to raise the quality of everything within that team. And then notice this blue and green boxes here, and the big square one in implementation. So that big square one in the middle, where it says product folk, developers, testers, designers, etc., that is where a lot of the testers are right now. And I think this is a great place to start. So if you are a software tester and you're getting into the field, or you're trying to go, well, how the heck do I start expanding out to what Carlos was talking about? Well, you start with this first. Get good at testing this middle part. That's probably where you're starting. And then from there, pick one of the other blue and green boxes and start tackling the quality there. If you don't know programming very well, you're probably going to go to the left-hand side real quick, right? Where you're doing the customer experience, designers, ideation, right? Working with external, internal quality. If you have a little bit of engineering experience, you might start on the right-hand side, where you're working with CI, or continuous integration, continuous deployments, working with SRE, working with observability, talking to them about what monitors you would like, how you would like to be alerted, who should the alerts go to, that kind of stuff. You might be part of that conversation. But pick one of the boxes outside of that and start tackling that part. And that requires that you go back to work and you go, well, which one would make sense for me to start? You might go for the one that is the biggest problem. You might go for the one that is easiest for you to integrate yourself into. Either way, understand your context and pick one of them and start moving towards that. And slowly start grabbing the other boxes. Questions, thoughts, feelings, concerns?
Nothing online, but I do like the fact that, you know, people's journeys are going to be a little bit different. Like you said, you know, you might tackle the harder parts that you find intimidating, or the easier parts first, and that's all perfectly okay.
100%.
You can find mentors for each one of these boxes.
100%. I totally agree with that. Each one of our journeys are going to be different, and your goal is not to make every single box perfect. That's not your goal. You're just trying to improve quality one piece at a time. And eventually, as you start doing that, well, the things that you need to improve won't be as bad anymore. They're going to be smaller optimizations, right? But you want to identify what are the things that keep you up at night. Maybe talk to your developer. What keeps you up at night? Talk to your PM. What keeps you up at night? You're going to get different answers. Well, that right there are things that are probably low quality that need improvement. And you go, of this list of things that I've just gathered by asking questions, which one do I want to tackle? Which one can I take on myself? Which one do I need a team with? Maybe I should reach out to someone at QAP and ask them, how do you guys handle this? My PM said that this is a problem for them. I'm not really sure what to do. Ask in QAP and you'll have a whole community of people come chat with you and help you out. Okay, so what skills do I need to be a great tester? I'm glad you asked, because here's a slide. So for soft skills, the first one I put is inquisitive. This is not in any particular order, by the way. Notice it's an unordered list. But inquisitive, you gotta be good at asking questions. And I mean asking good questions. There's the quote that's like, there are no bad questions. Well, there are definitely better questions. So you have to be able to ask good questions. Because if you ask bad questions, you're going to get on people's nerves very quickly. But if you ask good questions, you're going to get a lot of information very quickly that you can do things with. So being inquisitive, being curious, asking these questions, investigating, right? Trying to find the answers to things so then you can assess quality and provide solutions. Number 2 is being creative. Now, in all of these bullet points that I have, you could argue that shouldn't everyone have these? Sure, but it's, you know, like when you're doing something like heart surgery, right? You probably want that person to be able to be calm under pressure. Should everyone be calm under pressure? Of course. Everyone should be calm under pressure, but don't you think that person should be a little more calm under pressure? I think so, right? Doesn't that make sense? Kind of the same thing here. Yes, if everyone had all these skills in spades, fantastic. But for testers, these are especially important because this is essentially how you're doing your job. So being creative, I put this on here because as a tester, there's going to be things that the PM, the developer, they're focused on certain aspects of the product and they're building things a certain way. And you as a tester, if you just go into that conversation and you look at what they've done, you go, yeah, it looks great. What value have you added to that conversation? If you go in there with a different mindset, if you go in there thinking, well, I'm thinking of goodness, correctness, value, risk, let me ask questions to make sure all 4 of these are good. Then you might say something a little bit different that adds to the conversation and adds more value. The best testers I know are very observant, very articulate, like I said before. Of course, think critically because you're going to be dealing with a lot of different things moving at the same time. So you have to be able to work through those things. Communication, not just in the articulation, but communication, you have to write a lot as a tester. Not necessarily things like test cases, but usually we'll do lots of documentation. You're trying to, your Slack messages as you're working with other people. A lot of your work is done through communication. So being good at it is obviously going to be required. Being empathetic, not just for your customers, but also for people around you. Understanding that developers also have a hard job and working with them towards things will help you so then you're not so defensive against people like that. Of course, being tenacious, patient, and then strategic as well. So in every conversation that I have, it's always very strategic, right? You have to understand there are times when you have to sacrifice the pawn to win the game, if that makes sense. So when you're thinking about software testing, there are going to be trade-offs that you have to be able to provide the solution to and try to have an unbiased opinion on it. And there's going to be things you're going to care about a lot. I think we should do this right now. And if you get pushback from that, or you push back on them, we're all on the same team trying to build a high quality solution. I don't know of any developer or any person on any team that I've worked with that is like, I want to write a really bad feature. I want to just be so bad. I just wanted to screw everyone over, right? I don't know anyone that's done that that wasn't like a hacker or something like that. Almost everyone wants to build high quality solutions. And so working with them to say, here's what you're going to do to build it. Here's what I'm going to do to build it as well. Working together on that, now we're building something awesome and being strategic in those relationships and conversations. Shoot, we can go on and on, folks. Hard skills, or the technical quote unquote skills. The first one is defining and sharing oracles. Now, if you don't know what an oracle is in software testing, it's essentially how you know that something is good or not. Like in a nutshell, that's what it is. In test automation, it's a little simpler because it's how do you know that the test passes or fails. And what's interesting here is a lot of people that go into test automation immediately because like, oh, I know how to code, so I go to test automation, usually have the worst oracles because they're asserting very shallow things. Make sure the length of this list is 3. So you're testing one aspect of correctness, but there might be other things you should be asserting as well, and you're not because you're so focused on just the length of something. So what I mean by oracles, again, how do you determine something is good or not? This is something that you have to share with your team to say, here's what I'm looking at from my perspective as a tester. How do you see that? Do we agree that this is what makes this feature good or not? And either they agree or they don't. If they agree, fantastic. Now you add that as part of your technical design. If they do not agree, well, now you start a conversation. Well, if I'm off, can you help me understand what I'm missing? What am I not seeing? And together you define an oracle that the team agrees to. You create useful test plans. Now in test plans is a whole other topic by itself as well. When I talk about test plans, I usually just add them to a technical design. I mean, we're already working through that document. It's our single source of truth for the feature. And so you just put things in there. And it probably might just be a list of oracles. Just here's what we want these things to be able to do. For example, if we have a new service that's going to be between two other services, the transaction time between these three should be under 3 seconds. Boom, oracle written. The team understands that performance really matters here, right? Things like that. You create these things to say, here's what we're going to be aware of as we're building this. It doesn't have to be a completely separate document. If it is, it's probably not being looked at. So put it in the place where everyone's working off of, so you have a single source of truth, not 5 places that have a little bit of the truth. Understand testing techniques and how/when to use them. I'll get it. Understand testing techniques and how/when to use them. In this case, there you hear lots of different types of testing. There's black box testing and white box testing, functional, non-functional, accessibility, observability. There's all these different things that you hear. As someone starting out, you don't need to worry about a lot of these things, right? You're already seeing things like, here's the skills I need to have, my soft skills. I got to be thinking about correctness. Let me work on that first main box that Carlo showed. Cool. As you start learning more, you're going to start bringing in more tools, more techniques. Maybe you pick up Postman. Maybe you dive into Chrome DevTools a little more. Maybe you pick up Lighthouse, whatever the case may be. I'm good. Anyway, whatever the case may be, you start learning more and adding to your skill set, more tools added to your belt, for example. But that's something you need to know how to use, because that is, well, part of your job as a tester is knowing when to deploy any of these techniques. For example, I'll add an example here. Lots of testers that I know will apply the hammer of UI automation to everything. They will learn Cypress, they will learn Selenium, or they'll learn Playwright, and everything gets tested by that tool. Cypress is probably the biggest offender of this, because they want to do everything in Cypress. It may not be the best tool for everything, believe it or not. So there might be other ones that might be a little bit better. Still in your stack and everything, it just might not be a Cypress thing. And so it's being aware of that and picking the right tool for the job, right? You can only do that if you understand your tools and techniques. Understand your domain, of course. You'll hear a lot of people say that testers should be like experts of their domain, like they really know the industry in and out. Like, sure. What I mean more so by this is understand where you're at. So if you're working at Intermountain Healthcare, well, the way that you test is going to be very different than if you're working at Netflix, right? So understand that domain or context you're in. Define high quality for your context. Without that definition, people are kind of just trying to do their best and code however they think is best. If there is no standard, if there's no definition for this, then it's very difficult to get everyone to agree to a standard of high quality. High quality will always be a moving target. So what we did at Adobe is we created something called the way, or the well-architected index. And we would have all of our teams follow the way, because it was the way. And this was essentially a scorecard that would grade your service that you were writing. And it would tell you whether it was a high quality service or not. And what we'd be able to do then, especially my team that was looking at places that needed improvement, all the teams that were doing really well, I'm not going to send people there to help out. They're doing really well right now. Awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. Let me find a team that's doing really poorly, and let's help them out so we can get them up to high quality as well. And we jump in with them, consult with them, pair with them, maybe help them write some contract tasks, whatever we needed to do to help them get started. And then they started going on their own. We moved on to the next team, and we could measure their progress as they got better and better. Assess and describe quality and trade-offs to stakeholders. Going back to David's point, you got to be able to talk to people. You got to be able to articulate, describe things, and do so in a way that is actually relevant and helpful to them. This will get rid of the problem of, well, developers, they don't want to test my stuff or help me test. If you're able to describe some of these trade-offs, if they don't test, here's the problem, they might be more willing to. I had one person I had a tester say, I don't like being interviewed by non-testers because they don't know the value of testing. So of course I'm going to fail in that interview. And in my head, I'm like, well, doesn't that show that you're lacking some skills as a tester then? Because if you're not able to talk to non-testers about testing and get them to understand, well, you're going to have a very hard time in this field. And so we had a talk and we were able to have a conversation around that. And eventually went, oh, okay, I see. And we actually had some scenarios together around how we would do that. And I don't think they have that problem anymore. But just that comment they made has stuck with me over these years. Seems to be something that happens a lot. And then lastly, leverage tools and techniques to augment your testing. I mean, as you start, again, getting better and adding more things, there's going to be lots of ways that you can improve your testing, make testing faster, and how can you leverage those things? So I've had someone who wanted like browser stack or Lambda test or Sauce Labs because they wanted to be able to test across multiple devices. And well, I don't have all the devices at my desk. So can I just use one of these platforms that has all those devices and test that way? Well, if you can't talk about the value of that, then all it sounds like to me was you want to spend a lot of money to test on some other devices. And I go, well, what devices do we have right now? Well, we have these 3. Isn't that enough? And then what's the tester going to say at that point? Well, no, what if, okay, well, how many users are using this? And now my data is going to beat your data, right? Because you're not articulating that. So leveraging tools, techniques to augment your testing, only helpful, only helpful. And the lastly, measure quality and progress. That gives you all the data you need in order to show not just the value you're adding or the value your team has, but also be able to say, are we high quality or not? Fantastic. All right, next slide. Exploratory testing is super important. Now, I put this in here. You saw Dan put exploratory, experimentation, investigation all over those models, right? It's super important. This is the thing that makes a tester, is the fact that you explore and you experiment. Now, immediately the first question I get is, well, Carlos, in an agile environment, how do you make time for exploratory testing? Well, if you're doing it right, you saw that the shift left and shift right gives you all of the time to do so. Because what are you doing before you get a build? If you're only testing when you get a build, well, you're doing a little bit of exploratory testing, but you're not exploring all the other things you could be working on as well. So again, it's more than just correctness, because all you're getting is a build and exploring at that time, you're probably focusing more on correctness than anything else. And then I've said this years ago, but I want to mention it again. To become a great tester, or I say become a great tester first, then add automation. I've seen automation engineers start with automation and then start picking up testing stuff. Those are the hardest people to train because they're already starting half in programming, half in testing. It's like the worst of both worlds. Where a developer going into testing is much easier to train. A tester going into automation is much easier to train. And sometimes I don't need the tester to know automation at all. If you think of automation as a tool, then you may not need it to assist or augment the testing that you're trying to do. Now, I like to use automation because it makes things, well, the whole point of automation, make things faster. So I can get results faster. For example, being able to run a Lighthouse audit is much better than me doing that all manually myself. So why wouldn't I leverage the automation that Lighthouse provides, especially when it's free and right there in your browser? So you shouldn't be against automation because it's there to help you, right? If you're using Postman, you're automating too. So it's all there. Use those tools to help you, but be a great tester first. Then you're going to avoid a lot of the pitfalls that automation engineers run into, where they write terrible oracles, really shallow assertions, and all they want to do is turn manual regressions into automated tests. And as you saw the rest of my presentation, if all you focus on is correctness, you're missing 75% of what our role is. All right, and the last bonus part, I kind of threw this in here just because it's another common question I get before we go into the resources. How will ML and AI change software testing? I'm going to fix it real quick. There we go. How will it change software development? Because it's going to change development more than testing. But this right here, this is a tweet from Jeff Dean. Jeff Dean is the senior fellow and senior vice president at Google AI. So one of the head people at Google AI, Jeff Dean. This is what they said just recently. ML-assisted coding is helping thousands of Google software engineers. We see 6% reduction in coding iteration time, and currently 3% of new code is now generated from accepting ML completion suggestions. He's showing you measuring in progress in a tweet, by the way. So I promise you can probably do better. But they're measuring progress for what they're doing, what this team is working on specifically. They know exactly how much they've reduced coding time. Oh, crazy, right? But notice what I love about this is the first 3 words. ML-assisted coding. They're not looking to replace developers. They're not looking to replace really anything. They're looking to assist to turn down all of those metrics. Faster times, more code being created automatically that they don't have to worry about. Awesome. So what if we did the same thing with testing? What if instead of saying, is ML going to replace this? Is ML going to take over this? What if we just said that ML is going to be assisting testing? ML-assisted testing. This is where things are going. And I can tell you because I'm working on a project that's exactly this. Machine learning assisted testing. Not to replace testers, not to test everything for you. It's to assist you. It's a different way to think about it. The fact of the matter is that machine learning is going to augment processes for many roles. Content creation, social media, lots of things in there can be done automatically with machine learning. Digital sales, marketing, customer support, so many things can be augmented and assisted through machine learning. So the same thing is going to happen with software testing. There's going to be things that start appearing that are going to help you in your job, just like Lighthouse and Postman helped you with your job. The exact same thing is going to happen with machine learning. Now, these outputs will need to be tested. If they're generating code automatically, well, you want to make sure that that code is good, right? It may be correct. That's probably what the developer is testing is I want code that does this from a computer, and the machine learning system outputs some code and they go, sweet, and they accept that. So they might be looking for correctness, but are they looking for goodness, value, risk? Maybe not. And so we always need to test these outputs. The ML systems need testing too. Companies are going to start leveraging machine learning more and more and more, start building their own systems. Well, they need testers to help them test these systems. And machine learning systems are a little bit different than traditional programming systems. So knowing how to test these things will only help you in your career. And there's going to be more and more jobs that are looking for testers that know how to test ML. Yes, machine learning will become more and more common, but even with that, testers are not going to be replaced. So no worries there. That is no one's goal. We're not trying to replace that. We're trying to assist and augment it. So it's not so darn hard. You can focus on the good stuff. Let us worry about the easier stuff. All right, resources to learn testing and automation. We're at the end, folks, no worries. Of course, testautomationu.com, Test Automation University, I'm gonna always shout it out. Again, it's completely free and it can take you from knowing nothing of programming all the way to writing automation that's actually really helpful in many different languages, right? So if you're like Python or JavaScript or Java, whatever the case may be, there's going to be a learning path on there that you can pick up and start learning. It's pretty cool. The second one is ministryoftesting.com. Ministry of Testing, or MOT, it is the largest testing community in the world. They have events worldwide. And it's just a great resource to have. There's a free version that they have is already awesome. And then they have a paid version as well, a pro version that I think is worth the membership. So if your company has budget, I would recommend putting some of that budget towards Ministry of Testing. And then of course, QA at the point. We got lots of stuff. Lots of stuff. We have it's the Slack channel. We have all these meetup events. If you look at our meetup page, we have two awesome ones. One is going to be more hands-on with manual testing. The next one's going to be about test project.io. Lots of really cool things. We have a knowledge base, a YouTube channel, so you're not going to miss anything ever. You can always watch the recording when you're available. And of course, the last thing is network with people, because the best way that you can learn how to do a lot of this stuff is by interacting with the people that are doing it already. How did I accelerate my career? It was by going to these events and talking to people much smarter than I was, that when I asked them a question, how do you handle this? This is the problem I'm facing. They had amazing answers, and that's what got me into where I'm at right now, is amazing people that share their knowledge. So there's so many people waiting to do that with you if you just put yourself out there a little bit and engage with the community. All right, y'all, that's it. Thank you so much. I will take any other questions you have right now. We'll hang out for a sec. But with that, thank you.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment
Uh-huh.
that I'm in a tough spot at my work, and I pulled some valuable pieces of information out of here that are going to help me get into a better spot. And I don't mean I'm in a bad position. I know better ways of doing things, but I'm in that place where they don't want to listen to me. And I think it's just my communication. I need to learn how to show them the value of this stuff so that they're not just listening to me, but they're, really buying into it because they understand the value of it. So I appreciate that part of the presentation. I think that's going to help me a lot. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, definitely. It's one of the hardest parts, I think, of our job, just because software testing has been, I think it's just been in a tough spot. It's been in a tough spot at least since I've been working in testing. It's been difficult. And so the fastest way that I've been able to make changes was there was a company called Jane.com that I was at. It was an e-commerce website. And there I was hired on as their first automation engineer, right? And I had 3 software testers that I had to also teach how to automate and everything. And that's again, so many topics that we could talk about. that's a whole other problem. But I thought that I was going to be able to hire more people because they had like 50 engineers. And so 50 engineers, I was supposed to automate everything. And then 3 testers that, were doing the best that they could. And learned day one that I couldn't hire anyone else. And I was like, okay, so that made it very clear. By the way, you have to do this all by yourself. I was like, all right. So in that, I could have gone many different ways with what they were saying, because I had, obviously the CTO was like, I don't want to hire any other testers. You're already expensive, Carlos. And I was like, damn, all right, well, love you too, man. But what I ended up doing was, instead of trying to automate everything myself, or I don't know, look at the list of regression tests and turn them into automated test cases. Instead, what I did was I found the one team that was really excited that I was there, because there was one team in particular that was stoked I was there, mainly because one of the people that I knew that referred me was on that team. So I said, well, let me go to this team and let me make this team a champion of quality. And so I worked with them on what are the testing and quality problems you guys face? How can we help you out with that? And I can help you help yourselves out with that, because you know that I'm by myself. So clearly I can't automate everything. If it was just me, it's going to take me at least 6 months, because I have to do all these other things at the same time. If you help me, it's going to take 1. Well, very quickly, the PM said, well, how much time do we got to dedicate to helping you out with this? And I said, if you gave me 1 person, then you don't have to worry about taking anything out of your sprint. Yes, you'll have a little bit less velocity because you're losing one of your developers, but give us a couple weeks, we'll work on something full time, and we can reassess. And they said, okay. And so that's why when I'm talking about strategy, when I'm talking about articulation, when I'm talking about that, it's exactly that. I wasn't trying to just go in there and be like, all right, testing and quality is amazing, everybody follow me. No, there's a lot of people that didn't want to follow me. Right? They were not happy I was there, because I was going to replace someone else's framework, and they were really butthurt that was going to happen. But what ends up happening is the team that became the champion for me, it was 1 developer that started it. We made it awesome. We used Cypress at the beginning. We worked with the rest of the developers so they could see how to do it themselves. They didn't have to reinvent the wheel. Because I don't need you to do all this from scratch. Let's show you how to write tests for this thing. Let's pair it together. What feature are you working on right now? This one. Okay, here's how we'd write tests together for it. And do that. And slowly, after a few months of me working dedicated on this team with them, eventually the developers knew how to do it on their own. Word had got out because they were now deploying faster than everyone else. Everyone started turning around going, how is this team doing that? I'm like, well, it's because they're focusing on this stuff. And so what ends up happening? Well, one other team says, can you do a lunch and learn to show what you guys are doing? Because I want to add Cypress too, but I don't know how to start. And slowly it started to go through the entire organization. So I call that land and expand. You start with 1 person, 1 team, you land there, they become a champion, and then you expand as obviously the value is shown. Land and expand. It's one strategy to do it.
It also showed your knowledge on the tools available to you. Because
Yes.
you were able to see that they were angry about changing a framework, and you said, wait a minute, I'm not changing it,
Yes.
I'm helping.
Yeah, and even though at that time I wouldn't have used Cypress myself, that was a decision I had to make because that was not the battle I wanted to fight at that time. And Cypress is in a much better place, by the way. I'm not trying to bash Cypress. It's a much better place now. But at that time, it wasn't great. So I didn't want to use it, but it's what the developers were familiar with. And my goal was not for me to own the testing. If it was, I'd have been like, no, Python. No, I wanted them to own it themselves, and I wanted them to be excited about it. They already knew JavaScript. They're already on board with Cypress. Fantastic. Half the battle is done. They're excited about using a testing tool. Great. How can I help out now? How can I foster that and kind of stoke the flame so that way they really enjoy doing it, right? And then other conversations happened as they started learning things about testing. And wait a second, this thing is really hard to test. Oh my gosh, there's a thing called testability. All of them, what? I didn't know that was a thing. And it's just education at that point. And now they're curious. And now they're like, well, how do you do this? What if this is the case? And then you work it, and it just becomes fun at that point because now everyone is talking about it, not just the testers anymore. So that land and expand was very helpful there. I have other things that I've done as well, if anyone's interested, but good stuff, good stuff. Land and expand, that's a good one.
There's a question in chat that you missed.
Oh, I can see it. Holy moly.
Kathleen.
Okay, is automation only able to test correctness? Can it test the other areas you mentioned? 100% yes. Yes, one awesome person, her name is Maret. She's presented here at QAP actually. She is, I want to say, the mother of contemporary exploratory testing. And she will tell you firsthand that she uses automation all the time to do exploratory testing. And so in being able to assess the goodness of something, right, depending on how you define the goodness, it'll either be something that's subjective or objective. Anything that's objective is something that you can automate. If it is subjective, now it's more of an opinion thing. Well, maybe AI in the future can do that. But for now, no, we can't. So the goal shouldn't be, can I automate all 4 of these pieces? The goal should be, how do we cover these 4 pieces? What pieces make sense for us to automate to get the best return on that? What pieces do not make sense to automate? Right, so when you're thinking about goodness, correctness, value, risk, there's gonna be some parts of automation that help with risk exactly. For example, when I talked about progressive deployments, that is a mitigation technique. That's all it is. And for those who don't know what progressive deployment is, it's you get a feature, and instead of releasing it to everyone in your customer base, you release it to 5% of your customer base. And you watch the 5% and you say, is it working well? If it's not, then you roll it back or you turn on something else, but you get rid of it. You make the changes you need to make, and then you go back to the 5%. What you're doing there is you're trying to decrease the blast radius of any negative experience or any bugs, right? If there's a bug, it only affected 5%. Still sucks, but it only affected 5% of the people. If 5% are good, let's go to 10%. Let's go to 25%. Let's go to 50%. Let's release it to everyone. Eventually you turn off the feature flag and now everyone has access to that feature. But that right there, that automation is exactly a risk mitigation technique. So there is automation that can be applied to all 4 of those.
So I was just wondering, I'm on a team where I'm the only automation engineer. So the problem I'm having is we're just one team. So in order to like do the land and expand, do I just find one developer and help them with the tickets they're working on?
Yes. Yep, exactly right. So you pick one, and usually you pick the one that you feel most comfortable to work with, right? So if you know someone that's like just being really nice, a very kind person, you're like, I want to work with this person. Because sometimes, unfortunately, there's almost always one person on the team that's kind of an asshole. And you're like, well, this is definitely not the person that you're going to start with, but they're going to be the hardest person to convince maybe, or to turn or whatever. So that's the last person you go to. You try to get everyone else. And it doesn't have to be a developer too. It can be other people, right? Eventually I got the CTO to turn around as well, because they started realizing that I wasn't in there to just wreck everything. But that was what he was told when I was getting started. Other people were like, well, this is what they're going to do. And so immediately he was biased when he met me, and that's what created the initial confrontation between he and I. But once we broke through that and we actually had conversations together, then he goes, okay, oh, Carlos is all right. You know, it wasn't bad anymore. And then we were able to have adult conversations rather than like, well, I don't like what you're doing. You know, it changed from that to constructive conversations. So that's why I said like tenacious and patient, because a lot of the time it's just people that don't know. They just don't know. They already have biases, or maybe they had a bad experience in another company where testers weren't helpful. They were always the bottleneck slowing things down. So they're like, well, I'm going to a new company. There's testers here too. All right, okay, well, this is gonna, you know, and they already have these bad experiences and biases. And so breaking those down can be difficult too. And I've also found that developers that have been at a company, the same company, for like 10, 15, 20, 30 years are almost always the hardest ones because they're so used to something being that way. And you always hear the comment, well, it's always been that way. Well, that's just what we do here. And those comments are really destructive of any sort of creativity, curiosity, all the things that testers want to do. Saying, well, that's just how it's always done, tries to kill all that immediately. So being tenacious and get through that and say, no, I'm here to actually help out. I understand that's how you've always been doing it, but what if we tried it this way? Well, I don't want to. Well, then let me find another team. Hey team, you're willing to talk to me. What if we did it this way? Oh, let's just try it out. Let's try it out for a sprint or two and see what happens. If it fails, okay, let's try something else. But if it works, and then the story continues. I think there's another question on here. We see. Product owners can be a place to start. Yes, exactly. UX people usually too, because UX people usually want lots of feedback. And they can get, it's sometimes difficult to get feedback from developers. Again, if you just throw a Slack message, can you look at my designs and see which one you like? You might not get any engagement to that. So product owners, UX designers are usually people that would love to have your feedback and have another voice.
We don't have
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, whoever is representing the business might be the CEO or something. All right, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing. Thanks so much for attending. Really appreciate it. You see all my stuff on there on the slide. So if you do want to reach out, I'm on the Slack channel, of course. You can always hit me up on Twitter, any one of these places as well. And with that, thank you so much. Have a good one.